13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Welcome back to another episode of 13 Questions. This time our guest is Jake Loco from Loco Listens Podcast. But before we get into the interview portion of the show, I have, as always, with me, Adam. Adam, how are you this Saturday?
Phenomenal. I am great.
Yeah, we just got to spend a little bit of time with Jake Loco from Loco Listens. We connected via Instagram. He helps out with the Alt Media United accounts and promotions and stuff like that with Mark Palmer Steves Jr. So that's how the two shows got connected, and it's always just a fun time interviewing somebody who's also a podcaster. I don't know, it's just easier in general. He's got his audio set up already, and yeah, it makes things a little bit more smoother. So yeah, this was definitely a super interesting conversation. We hit on a lot of topics that you might not expect on. We hit on a lot of topics that you might not expect too. And yeah.
No, it was a great conversation, especially speaking to someone who's an active teacher. You know, it always their brain is kind of in a different mode and perspective dealing with the youth. And so, yeah, overall, it was just a very, very fun and enlightening conversation, and always, seems to be how do I put this? Great dive into neurolinguistics and words and meanings, and it's always good to kind of be aware of the power of the things you say.
Yeah, language pops up again in this interview. I love that topic. We've been hitting on it a lot, especially with the Mark England podcast and his guests coming up. But I didn't know that he was a teacher until he mentioned it, actually, which is cool because I think the only other currently employed teacher, it was Professor Radagast, and he's teaching college literature, I believe. So it was neat to talk to somebody else in that profession. And of course, we talk about literature in the podcast too, and how that's important. And by the way, we do have a question 3 book catalog up on the website, which features all the answers to the book question: what is the most influential book in your life and why, from all the guests. And they're linked to Amazon for your convenience in case you wanted to purchase a physical copy of whatever book they recommended on their episode. Enough of plugging that for now. Adam, did you want to do the gratitude jingle?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude. Gratitude, 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 oh, gratitude.
I've got one outside because the weather is turning warmer here up in Michigan, and I can actually go outside and enjoy myself without being snowed on. So I went out and bought a 4-foot hacksaw, and I've been using it to trim off pine tree branches and other forest things I come across that need pruning in the forest that surrounds my house. And that's a super cool investment for me, just because my reach is extended by not only 4 feet because of this giant hacksaw. It's got a ribbon, what do you call that? A ribbon blade, I guess. It just kind of hooks onto 2 screws and locks into place on one end with the handle. But I'm 6'4" already, so when I put this thing up above my head, you add 3 feet for the arm, and then another 4 for the hacksaw. Allows me to get up pretty high. So, and it's gratifying because I guess we could tie it back into the whole reality transurfing concept of man's drive to control his environment, as opposed to just surviving. Like, we want to thrive, right? So shaping our environment around us is part of that, like, natural drive to shape our reality and be creative. So yeah, I'm just really enjoying being outside, the sunshine, and being out in the forest, getting all those natural terpenes, right? So yeah, I've been having a good time with that. So my gratitude is a 4-foot hacksaw that I bought from, I don't know, some hardware store. It's not a big chain one.
Phenomenal. No, I mean, you are, improving the health of the environment around you. And when you do that, nature benefits and you will reap the reward. So yeah, whether if it's just in cultivating your garden or, cultivating to prevent pest, you can make your conditions better. And ultimately, I mean, we're in a deep symbiosis with plants and the environment anyways. So we are consuming the oxygen they create. They are consuming our CO2. And yeah, it's a beautiful process to involve yourself with.
Yeah, I started kind of going around the perimeter last year and taking out greenbrier. I kind of mentioned this in the episode too. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been a learning experience, that's for sure. Because, coming from the west side of a small town in Indiana, it's not, I don't call it a small town, right? But mid-sized city, very urban environment. The smells are completely different. I used to live, a mile away from the airport, so I'd get all the plane flyover and traffic, and my house was maybe a block away from the railroad tracks. We had the South Shore running to Chicago there, and the freight train. So yeah, just being able to enjoy being outside in nature in a different environment other than a urban landscape is just been amazing. Yeah. What did you have in mind?
Mine's very simple. It's having access to just good meals. Not all places in the country or in the world you have access to prepared meals that are, relatively not filled with garbage. I think we're in the middle of, the pool that we've peed in anyways, but all things considered, being able to get a meal that is, something simple like simple ingredient bread, meat, mashed potatoes, and have it be affordable and available around, as opposed to, a completely processed and preservative filled piece of meat. It's I don't know, it's something that I am incredibly thankful for. Because in this crazy world where it used to be the only things you consumed around you were, natural, and you had to worry from a poison or reaction standpoint. Now we have to think about it from a compatibility standpoint of, we weren't really designed to process these things and these chemicals and these compounds, but we are, and there's consequence. So it's being able to, I don't know, not being forced into that existence of consumption, which, I mean, in this world, it's a necessity based on how we're structured. So I'm blessed.
And it allows for, variety is the spice of life too. I mean, if we were just forced to eat what we had and grew ourselves, we'd be kind of SOL. Like, I'd be eating walnuts in the winter and living off a meal for months, right?
Oh yeah, and that's the beautiful thing that ties into the conversation we have tonight, that, you on your own can only do so much. You cannot argue that the best tasting tomato is a fresh heirloom tomato, freshly picked, grown in the sun, that is ripened on the vine in, just the proper conditions and growth. And in the same way, well, yeah, you could have the most delicious tomatoes, but if that's all you have, how about this? You have the fresh baked ground wheat with the fresh or the yeast collected from the air, freshly baked by one person, another person who is rearing the cattle and raising them and, creating the beef, and, the person who's going and growing the spices and the herbs and, processing those, tomatoes into, making it into just like a tomato paste to be able to put on, or all these other things that we've done to, enhance a food that can be done completely naturally. You would need an entire community. It would be too much for the average person to one person make an entire burger. So yeah, it's a beautiful thought thought process that even in a world where we got rid of all of, the modern problems that seem to ill us, to find, just great enjoyment in the simple complexity of life would still require a whole bunch of us.
Yeah, food is a powerful tool that people can use to...
And we take it for granted.
Yeah, we do. Until you grow it yourself. But then you get a little bit more appreciative of it. Like I grew some butternut squash a couple of years ago. It was the most delicious butternut squash I've ever tasted. But being able to share it with other people, also brings joy. And we get introduced to new things by other people. And this requires, collaboration and cooperation as opposed to competition, right? So speaking, on that note, if you want to support 13 Questions, please support our affiliates. We mentioned them in the interview section too, but just to quickly rehash them here, we have our newest one is Aura Cacao. So if you're into ceremonial grade cacao, definitely jump over there, check that out. Your purchase, if you use the link via the website or the show notes of any of these, you'll help support the show. So if you're into ceremonial cacao, if that's something you want to add to your spiritual practice, possibly, check out that. We also have, of course, red light therapy from Mark Sloan, and that I've had luck with that on my skin personally. So if you're looking for an alternative there, it's got more than just skin benefits, by the way. So check out that episode with Mark Sloan and red light therapy. And then our last affiliate, longest, is Shungite from Derek Condit. So if you're into Shungite, EMF mitigation, protection, and other semi-precious stones and other mystical wares in general, there's a lot more than just Shungite there. So definitely check out that. That's episode 50 of 13 Questions. And last but not least, if you want to support the show, the best way to do it is to share it with somebody that you care about. And time, talent, and treasure, right, Adam?
Time, talent, treasure. Exactly. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Email us at 13questionspodcast@gmail.com. Check out the website, 13questionspodcast.com, and enjoy tonight's episode with Jake Loco.
Hey guys, nice to meet you guys, and I appreciate the invitation. This is a really cool show, and I've been able to learn a lot about some interesting folks in this community through your 13 questions. So I appreciate what you guys have been doing, and I'm excited to get into it today.
Well, I guess you get to join that knowledge pile as well here. So congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, you ready for the first question?
Let's dive in.
What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
Really cool question to start with. And yesterday was my father's birthday. He was born on Friday the 13th, and then every 7 years, he gets that special day once again, May 13th, Friday the 13th. So one day he pulled me aside. We were enjoying a little cannabis together, like we do as a father-son kind of bonding ritual. And he's like, Jake, I have a song that I want to show you. It's like, all right. And he had a very serious look on his face. I was like, oh boy, what's going to happen? And he threw on The Long and Winding Road by the Beatles. Pretty nice song. It's a nice little ballad. And he was looking me dead in the eyes, totally serious. And he said, Jake, this is the song I want you to play at my funeral. It's like, wow. Okay. So we were having one of those conversations. I didn't know what to expect. I thought we were going to chill and listen to some nice music, but he wanted to make sure that we had this discussion before it was too late. And what he gave me other than that song was the lyrics in the song, The Long and Winding Road. He was always like, Jake, listen, life is this long and winding road. And what you need to remember is there's a voice in your gut, in your heart, wherever, and it's going to guide you. Whether you're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, it'll always let you know where you are headed. So on this long and winding road, please remember to listen. And that's, I mean, it's a very powerful conversation for many reasons. And I know that one day when I am at my father's funeral, I will be carrying on that message to whoever attends. My entire family will continue that message and teach their children, their grandchildren to listen to that innate intelligence that guides them to the right decision. And that's an
incredibly powerful thought and idea to be wound up in such a thing that just, I mean, the inevitable, right? We all have the same, on a long enough timeline, we all have the same fate. So it is an inevitable, hugely powerful thing that everyone will think back to. And that's something that can get passed on that's amazing. Never would have thought that's cool. Sorry.
That's great. Yeah. So happy birthday, Dad. And thank you for sharing such simple yet profound words of wisdom, because now, I mean, in my current profession as a high school teacher, I could teach the same thing, maybe through literature, through whatever, just to be like, hey, man, there's a lot of decisions you could make, but you always know deep down which one you should make. And that's been a great reminder for me and for the people that I influence in my professional life as well.
I like how we ended it with a request to please remember to listen to that voice. It reminds us that to listen, you have to be still and to be silent and to, quiet your mind, which is helpful if you're trying to listen. So,
well, it's a double-ended request. Please listen and do. Yes. And then that ties a moment to emotion throughout time. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys recognize that, because it definitely opens up the discussion on, well, what kinds of things do we do to ourselves that makes it more difficult or more challenging to hear to hear that guidance. I think about, staying healthy, grounded, like you said, staying centered, and, just always prioritizing those habits and those behaviors that will help me be a receptive antenna for this wisdom.
What do you willfully ignore?
So I kind of imagine that a lot of people answer this question in the same way. And from the few episodes that I have listened to, I decided that I was just going to answer honestly, because, it's a lot of people don't want to pay attention to the same things. But I had a couple ideas on this. So one could have been, well, unnecessary drama that does not really concern me. Like, I'll give you an example. So sometimes it's good to pay attention to politics, because those politics could have a direct impact on our personal lives, our daily routines, like a mandate or a lockdown, things like that. But I would draw the line at like the sex life of a celebrity or a politician. It's like, I don't need to know any of that shit. Like, I would be better off not really indulging in it. And that goes for any sort of gossip that doesn't necessarily concern me. And that invites a sort of energy that makes me want to like target people and criticize them too harshly. I would rather criticize myself than to, focus in on the sex life and the drama and the kind of like unnecessary inquisition of other people, particularly celebrities, because they already get enough attention. So, why externalize all that energy when we could just focus on ourselves and try to make ourselves better? So I hope that all made sense.
No, it does. It's kind of like a game where you can't really win. You might as well gamify something else in life, because
right.
You're like a computer. You only have so much bandwidth. So what are you putting in? If that energy is going towards, the local celebrity, then that will consume a substantial portion of your life. And
exactly.
What can you gain? There's not much leverage except for maybe water cooler talk.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a distraction when we're focusing our energy on criticizing others, like celebrities and whatnot. It keeps us from looking at ourselves. Which, to go back to the first question, listening. You have to listen to your inner voice and not be distracted by, like you were saying, like little celebrity sex gossip or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's fun and fulfilling to be critical, as long as I continue doing it in a way that's productive. And when I say productive, I would think about like, well, the reason why I would listen and, I name my podcast Loco Listens is because I may not be like a well-researched, like a well-read kind of guy, but, I'm just trying to listen and learn. And if I'm learning something that doesn't really add any value to my personal life, I mean, let's take the example of like Antarctica and Operation High Jump. I love learning about Admiral Byrd and everything that he went through and what he may have seen. That story is fascinating. Some could argue that it has no direct impact on my personal life, but yet I have fun talking about it. And that's a really cool story. But like what my students are asking me lately is, oh, Mr. Loco, have you heard about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp? And I'm like, nope, change the subject, please, because none of that really concerns me.
Well, just to touch on the Admiral Byrd thing, like that example to me would be something to point out where like censorship came in and obstructed the truth from getting out, because apparently he had talked to a reporter in, I don't know, Argentina or something after he came back and told, spilled the beans, and then after that he was kind of locked up or something. But yeah, anywhere you can point out like censorship is worthy to research, when talking about Antarctica and things like that.
Yeah, and just an interesting rant on that really quick, because Argentina was a kind of a hub or an escape for a lot of these Nazis. So like they would escape there. So if Admiral Byrd was interviewed by someone in Argentina, odds are they probably had ties to the SS. So they were purposely smothering that message or, preventing it from getting out, so to speak. That's my own speculation, but
yeah, it's definitely an interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, sadly today, people want to, yes, know everything instead of going, there was a time when reading a story like Journey to the Center of the Earth was amazing. And the Admiral Byrd story is the exact same way that, ultimately, like, yeah, I want to know truths. However, it really doesn't matter, because what that allows me to think of, the possibilities, the ecosystem, the structure of the earth, what knowledge is, power control systems, just contextualizing all that into a story really allows you to just analyze and be more creative in life in just other ways. So yeah, I'm always, saddened when people are like, yeah, but not true. And I'm like, did you enjoy like listening to this story?
Right,
How does it make you think different? That's the perfect example story.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said. Like there's nothing wrong with being entertained. And there was recently a really cool show. Kyle from the Big Dumb podcast and Frantic Missy did the conspiracy thirst traps. And it was all about like this idea that you could waste time and energy focusing on these things. But I think what you just brought up, Adam, is perfect, because it's like, well, if we're getting something creative out of it, or if we're finding new questions, because having closure sometimes is a little boring. So it's nice to learn about things that lead to further exploration and this endless quest for knowledge, if you will. It's really fulfilling for me. And I know I'm never going to reach a particular destination, but it's this process and this learning journey that keeps me motivated and full of energy, for sure.
What book has been most influential on your life, and why?
So my freshman year of high school, the first book that I ever read was Lord of the Flies. And I say that because it was the first book that I decided I was not going to go into the Spark notes or the Cliff notes. Like I was actually going to read it beginning to end, cover to cover. And Lord of the Flies stuck out to me for a couple different reasons. One, culturally, I was about, the TV show Lost had just aired. I think that was 2008, maybe. And so this was going on. TV show Lost, for those who don't know, is about a plane crash onto an island. Very mysterious, spooky place. And Lord of the Flies begins in the same way. These young British boys crash onto this island, and they have to figure out how to survive with each other. And there's a great line from the TV show Lost, which is live together or die alone. And it's a very blunt statement, because it's like, if we can't figure out how to humanize the situation and work together, then we all will certainly die alone. So the story of Lord of the Flies is a great opening into not only our dark psychology and the sort of shadow of human beings, how if they have to survive in this kind of environment, then they will be pushed to act way, way below the standard of humanity. They might become violent, they might become thieves, things like this. So it was really exposing me to what humanity was capable of, but also on the flip side, showing the positive aspects of humanity that we could also be capable of. So if we're capable of such darkness and such evil, then we can also look towards some sort of lighter existence and to create that stable society on this island together. But we can only do it together. And that's really what I got out of it, was that if you were alone on the island, that's one thing. But when you're with a group of people and you're placed here and you have to figure out how to make it all work, well, it definitely taught me the value of cooperation for sure.
That's why literature is, I mean, you mentioned you were a high school teacher.
Mhm.
That's why I think literature is so important for kids to read growing up, especially young in high school, because they're so malleable. And
Right.
it seems like the only way we can get these messages out to them, because you're not going to get messages like this in history class anymore or whatever. It's only through like reading books that have these themes in them. And by introducing them that way, like the two books that stick out to me in Catholic high school that we read in literature is the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah.
And of course, we did the Mockingbird and a bunch of other classics too, but just learning from those books and the themes that they talk about, like it's not really it's more life lesson-ish than anything else any other subject really you're gonna get in school, in my opinion. Like maybe it's as close to philosophy as I got in Catholic school. We had a lot of religious classes, like religion classes, but yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling now. But
No, I
yeah.
mean, you're speaking of like a deep allegory. There are stories and ways of thinking where if you explain a situation, you can see how it represents itself in all situations. And yeah, that's an ancient way of storytelling that has been lost. Now we're of the idea that it's these exact words in this context and not double entendre, nuance to the language. And, it's the story or the overall, moral or energy of the story. So,
Yeah, right on. And whether it's the allegory of like Plato's Cave or this hero's journey from Joseph Campbell, it's pretty cool that these books offer something very universal, but yet they each have a unique window into who we are. And so one thing that you brought up, Bill, was that history class can only give you so much. Like a factual textbook will only give you half or maybe even less. So speaking of that, my 10th grade class just finished up Night by Elie Wiesel, which is the autobiography of a Holocaust survivor. And going through that was really tough because that's a very dark book. And just like I had brought up with Lord of the Flies, it's the same dark side of humanity that's exposed to these young kids who have probably never seen anything like this before in their entire life. And now that we finished it, we're moving on to The Tempest, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Tempest by Shakespeare, but speaking of Lord of the Flies and Lost, it also is about it's a shipwreck onto an island, and these people go to this island and they have to sort out all of their demons and unpack their shadow and basically work together to come to a resolution. And so it's the same way that Lost or Lord of the Flies works, where people are placed in this unfamiliar territory and they have to figure it out. And that's the perfect representation of the hero's journey, because you would be dropped into the unfamiliar land or territory, the country, and you have to figure out what to do, how to survive, how to become stronger. And then eventually you can return home with some kind of gift or some kind of treasure that you've learned throughout that process.
Yeah, I love that you said like you brought up hero's journey, because that has come up recently in recent episodes, because that really is the key. It seems to when you to have your own perspective on your own life. Are you going to pick the hero's journey or the victim's journey?
Right.
It's like an illustration or an example of what hero's journey would look like.
Yeah.
And there's just certain situations and aspects of life. Look, life is cycles and seasons. And if you know the seasons and the cycle and daylight, you can start predicting things. And there's certain experiences that we're all going to have. And especially, Lord of the Flies seems to me one of the great things is understanding how powerful we are as human beings when we can work together and the things that we can do, as opposed to when we're not. And then, once you realize that, you understand that just understanding how to socially maneuver and interact with other people is our greatest power we don't know we have. you're never going to have any of the technology, travel systems, infrastructure we have today as a single solitary person.
Well said. Well said. No man is an island. I forgot who said that, but it seems to fit into to what you just said, Adam. Right on.
What rule do you have for yourself that you never break, and why do you think it's important?
I've been a fan, or I've been learning from Jordan B. Peterson for quite a while. I actually used one of his clips in my class the other day because he was talking about the propaganda in Nazi Germany. But anyways, this is something that he said, or he's been saying in his lectures throughout his touring career, which is, do not say things that make you feel weak. And recently I did say something on a podcast that was a little self-deprecating. And the person I was talking to, God bless them, they were like, no, don't say that about yourself. You have to elevate yourself. You have to say things that make you feel strong and confident. Don't say things that make you feel weak. And it was, it's like sometimes it's a rule that I do break, but it's one that when I catch myself breaking it, it's a bit devastating. So what I like doing is figuring out how to modify language, not only so that I could feel stronger or more confident, more stable, but how could I also encourage others to feel the same? So it's choosing words carefully, saying things that have the vibratory power to do good and not to do harm. And, obviously, like, we don't want to harm ourselves. We don't want to harm each other. So language can be just as sharp a weapon as any sort of sword or spear or whatever. It's got to be used carefully with discernment. So yeah, do not say things that make you feel weak. That's definitely a good rule that I want to continue following.
Yeah, that's huge. The how we speak to ourselves, like avoiding negative self-talk. Like you mentioned that you heard the Chance Garton episode. He does the interview podcast, and on that episode, I caught myself doing this, but before I caught myself, or as I was saying something about the state of my throat chakra, I realized what I was doing, and then luckily Chance, and thank you, he caught it and gave me some advice, and we kind of redefined it. But yeah, it's tricky because it's so, like, we're so just I don't know, indoctrinated or ingrained or conditioned, programmed maybe is a good word.
For sure.
Think negatively, not negatively about ourselves, not in ways that are helpful.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we have to overcome, and it's not easy because, like you said, Bill, it's something that has been ingrained in us somehow. I can't really pinpoint the origin, but this sort of culture around putting ourselves down as a way to be funny or modest or to make other people feel comfortable. It seems like it's a bit of a psychological manipulation, but we do it to ourselves. It's not like we can point fingers and blame other people. And Chance Garton from the Interverse podcast, I just want to give community on the Interverse Telegram chats and the Weaving Spiders welcome group. Many people say this about Chance, and I want to say it too. He does bring out the best in everyone, and I appreciate what he's been doing. And Chance, buddy, keep up the great work, man. You're a big inspiration.
If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Well, a couple of my friends are going through challenging times, and some of these challenges are overcoming addictions. And one in particular would be pornography. So throughout 2020, this was a very common occurrence for people who were sort of isolated and they had no one to talk to or nowhere to go. So getting wrapped up in porn was something that a lot of people were vulnerable to. So my friend would reach out to me and ask me, hey, what should I do? And the simple answer was, well, don't watch porn. But it was also a matter of, well, how do I keep myself motivated? How do I find a better replacement for this type of energy? So we were working together on this, and I've personally have fell victim to this in 2021, more particularly. But anyways, getting over this and overcoming this obstacle has shown me something that my friends revealed about myself that I didn't really understand prior to this. And that's when my friend would have a relapse, I would get angry. I would get like genuinely pissed off. And he's like, whoa, like, I don't want you to antagonize me. Like, I would rather you motivate me. But when you're upset like that, it doesn't help. And so that was a really great lesson for me because I wanted to show my friend that I was concerned and that I cared about the outcome of his behavior, but I was expressing it in not the best way. So it taught me to like take a step back, take a deep breath, and to try to process this confusion and this turbulent energy that he was dealing with, and try to be supportive and motivating, even though I felt let down. And, I've let myself down before, and you lose respect for yourself when you do those kinds of things. And I did not want to make my friend feel like I was losing respect for him. So I've learned to be much, much more constructive in my criticism. And that's something that they would say is that I wish you were a little less critical. And so I've taken that to heart for sure in the last 2 years. And I definitely feel like I'm making progress, but that was definitely a setback that made me reflect on, just like we talked about in the last question, how are we using language? What is the energy behind our words and our thoughts, and how does it affect other people? And that's been a good reminder for all those things.
I love that you have you tackled that problem with an accountability partner. That having one of those helps a lot.
For sure.
And then I guess the only other thing that comes to mind with that particular subject is breath work. In order to, what I've found helpful, and this is, I wasn't taught this in school, so I kind of had to learn it myself. But when dealing with those energies that are closer to our root chakra, breath work can help draw those up through our system and be made into creative, inspired action, as opposed to, expelling energy another way, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, well said. If energy gets placed, having those deep, even just getting some exercise, which will kind of force you to breathe, definitely helps. Keep the energy flowing. If it gets stuck, then it starts to stagnate, and that's not good. So yeah, definitely a great reminder to emphasize the importance of breath work and to stay in motion whenever possible.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Interesting. So earlier when we brought up the Antarctica Nazi alien base, those kinds of topics, they have a lot of mystery behind them. And it could be any topic. That particular topic, though, is full of mystery because it's a place that I've never seen. I can barely imagine what it might look like. And I'm definitely turned on by that type of mystery creatively because, like we talked about earlier, it leads to more and more questions and this feeling that I want to find something, I'm seeking something. And that was the same way with that TV show Lost. You would finish an episode of Lost and you would have 10 more questions and none of them would get answered. And you just keep on adding to this pile of questions. And so it's great to dive into the mysteries, whether they're conspiracies or just different parts of the literary world that offer unique mysteries from unique perspectives. And the other thing, and I'm sure Chance talks about this quite a lot with language and just thinking about behind our language, but I'm inspired by phrases that have sort of a double meaning. Like when people say good morning, I never thought about that until recently, that we're actually saying mourning, like when someone goes to a funeral and they're mourning. And so thinking about that, that's like where most people start with this type of word magic. And that has got me really invested in etymology and thinking about not only where these words are coming from, but why are they sounding so similar to other homophones. So like morning and the morning, the time of the day, and then the time of they so closely connected, led to more and more questions. And the last thing I would say is nature. Spending time in nature definitely turns me on from an inspirational standpoint, because if I spend too much time inside, I feel like my thoughts get boxed in. So I kind of imagine walking on this winding forest trail, and that's allowing my thoughts to go in new places and not to be boxed into this square environment. So that definitely helps me open up creatively, for sure.
I love that you mentioned language and how we use it, because that was a huge theme on our Mark England episode recently. And I love etymology too. Have you explored the word abracadabra yet?
Dabra, as I speak, so it becomes. Yes.
Yeah, that to me was to learn about that and how to use it even was super super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my first introductions to etymology was actually from Jordan Peterson when he was talking about sin and how it's talking about this archery term where you miss the target or you miss the mark. And so that was really cool to think about because, when we're aiming for something valuable and you don't hit it, it's we're sinning. We're failing to live up to the guidelines, rules, and expectations that we have for ourselves. And that's a really cool way to think about it in a more visual perspective rather than just thinking about sin as a betrayal of God or something like that. It's more of a visual exercise that we can do when we're aiming at something.
Yeah, it's much more helpful than sin leads to hell forever.
Fire and brimstone, right?
What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
Yeah. All throughout high school, the early college days, I was very blessed. I've met a lot of great people and I've been in this wonderful community. And I've never had an issue making friends. And I've always been pretty chatty, extroverted to some degree. And I never had too many issues with the ladies. And I'm blessed to say that. But eventually, this streak did not last because I started to figure out, and this was something that I was hearing about, but tried to ignore because I didn't want to give it up. But I became very embarrassed and humbled when I started to figure out that casual sex was no longer an option for me. And it was because of the outcome. People think about this phrase when they're doing their career, like it's not about the income, it's about the outcome. I'm like, interesting. So how do I feel after a hookup? What is this hookup culture? How does it affect us? And I became very embarrassed when I was no longer able to enjoy this type of casual, very no strings attached type of relationship with my sexual partners. So that was very eye-opening because it set a milestone in my maturity, I think. I finally realized, well, this energy that we talked about earlier is sacred. And if I give it away too willy-nilly, then it's going to hurt me in the long run. And I could hurt other people as well. So I was embarrassed to figure that out at the time because it was during this very raw moment where I was unable to please the woman that I was with because I was like, well, this is casual. This is not what I'm really looking for. And it was a disappointment from my end because I was like, man, like I failed as a masculine man. I failed to do what I was supposed to do. But at the same time, it offered this very humbling reminder that, well, if you're doing the right thing, then you'll feel good and you'll feel 100% invested in what you're doing. But if you are aware that this is the wrong thing, that you shouldn't be doing this, then your body's going to respond in the same way. So although it was embarrassing, it definitely gave me a new direction to orient myself. And it's been for the best, even though at that moment, it was terrifying. But now I look back on it like, thank God I got to go through that when I was young, because now I'm much, much better off for that.
Yeah, that recognizing that there's just so much power in that energy. So, yeah, in the same way that, you were angry at your friend and,
Right.
words and neurolinguistics and, chalk it up to sex magic, there is an energy there that, if you're choosing to direct it in a way that you think is negative, then there's probably going to be a negative connotation because it's like you said, you got to follow what's inside. And ultimately, there's something in you that says yes or no. And, that income outcome, the short term or, the destination.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Well said.
And having the courage to follow what's inside too. Like, I know that's comes up in another question, but I call that courageous. Did I bleep out?
You said the word courage and then I lost you there. The feds took over.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I was saying that I know it comes up, courage comes up in another question, but I would say, to recognize that what trend was happening and then correct it, it takes a lot of courage and recognition. So in my book, it's courage.
What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it if you have?
This is definitely something that I am actively working on, and I hope that we can all overcome this. But for me personally, I know that becoming quote unquote evil is what I'm most afraid of. So let me back up a bit. My greatest passion is to inspire people, to motivate people to think for themselves. But my biggest fear is for my actions or my words, my energy to hurt other people, and for them to shut down emotionally or to be hurt physically by what I do or what I say. And so that fear is rooted in a lack of confidence, because I think we're afraid of what we're capable of when we're not confident in that lighter side of ourselves. You know, some people describe our higher self and our lower self. We have our base desires and our lower chakras, and then our upper chakras are where we have our more divine qualities, you could say. And, you know, I wouldn't want to separate those two areas. We have wholeness and divinity, and divinity and wholeness. But for me, I was always afraid that what I was going to do was going to end up as a disaster type of situation where I was going to isolate myself from other people. I was going to become exiled, basically, for speaking about certain things, doing certain things that were wrong. And this came up recently. I want to give all my love and gratitude to my family, even though I was sort of exiled from participating in family activities because I'm unvaccinated. And it was a choice that did lead to a lot of fear, because I was like, wow, I'm ruining my relationship with my family simply because I refuse to get this injection. But now I'm starting to think about it the other way. And I'm like, well, hopefully one day they'll respect me for sticking to my personal values, even though it put a strain on our relationship. And it's getting better. But especially that was a issue. And I was always afraid that being so stubborn on this one issue was going to destroy all these 26 years of, you know, loving family relationships that we've been a part of. And it was like, for this one thing, really. But now it's starting to resolve itself, and, you know, data is coming out, things like this. But that same fear stems from a lack of confidence in my own values. Now it's been it's been confirmed that my hunch, that decision that I stick to and that I will continue to stick to, was validated. But at the beginning, I felt pretty isolated. And so I've turned to a lot of podcasting communities who are thinking the same way, and they helped me overcome this fear, or at the very least begin to overcome it. And now that I'm able to talk about it and connect with people about making decisions or thinking beyond the status quo of your family or from the mainstream media, that fear is unnecessary, because we can be confident in our values and be firm in what we believe. And if we do that, then there's no reason to fear anything. We just have to believe in ourselves, most of all.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And everybody should follow their gut. You know, there's certain things you get feelings about. And listen, ice cream is awesome.
Yes.
Some people are highly allergic to casein and can die. So
Right.
Should they have ice cream? Well, it's not that awesome. So yeah, you know, we are very intuitive creatures, and anybody who's ever had a phone ring and known who's on the other line, or been thinking about somebody and had contact with them out of years, or any of those, you know, precognitive dreams that we've all had, just case it in that you can sense things, and your gut and your heart do have neurons. And yeah, if you trust yourself, if you learn to trust yourself, and I think as you know, you get older, you start to realize, I've had the same feeling before. Today I'll listen. That, if everybody did that for themselves, I think we'd be in a lot better place, because not everything's right for everybody. And my right is not your right, and it shouldn't be.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more.
What is your single greatest driving force in life, and how do you further it?
The single greatest driving force for myself is learning. And I know that learning requires humility, to accept that I don't know many things, but I'm willing to open myself up to this new information or to listen to someone carefully and consider what they're saying, even if I don't agree with them, which is also really fun because learning sometimes always will involve that type of vulnerability. And I'm becoming more open to speaking with people that I definitely don't agree with because I'm seeing a value in that contrast. And someone, I know we talked about Jordan Peterson quite a lot, but there's someone else I should bring up too. There's Jordan's daughter, Michaela, has her own podcast, and she does a show called Contrasting Views. I think that's what it's called. And she will bring on like, example, like a germ theory person and a terrain theory person, or she'll bring on like a pro Russia or a pro Ukraine. She'll always bring on the two opposing sides, opposing views, and she will moderate this conversation, and it always leads to something positive because these two people are aware of the fact that they are trying to learn from each other. They're trying to get their point across, but they're also tasked with trying to understand the other side. So as one of my big role models, Dave from the Generation Z podcast, always says, I'm trying to see things from both sides, folks. So that's going to be a lifelong mission for myself in this podcast community, because like I said, I'm not a very well-researched person. I'm super busy, but when I do have time to listen to people and learn from them, that makes me feel unbelievably fulfilled and energized. And it's always crazy when I do these podcasts in the evening, because I come out of them so wired and amped up, and I'm like, fuck, how am I going to go to bed after this? Like, I'm just full of energy. So that's definitely a big driving force for me. It's just trying to learn and putting in the energy and opening myself up to new ideas or opposing views, for sure.
Yeah, not having cognitive dissonance, right? Being able to unlearn too, as well as learn, is important.
Exactly. Forget everything you know. That's sometimes a good approach to take in certain cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's sometimes the expert is outsmarted by the noob just because they did something in a completely insanely different way that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But the only way you would do that is if you had the non-exposure. So yeah, it's always good to kind of get different people of different perspectives and different angles in on things. It's kind of like
Yeah, Adam, there's something I want to add to that, because
Sure.
I just turned 27, so I was thinking back about 11 years ago. I started to learn how to drive, and when I was first learning, my brother gave me advice, and I'm going to talk about him later in the next question. He's telling me I should learn from as many people as possible, because if you learn from one teacher, they're going to show you how they can do it. And if you learn from two teachers, you're going to get two perspectives, two different ways of doing the same thing. And like in the end, it's the same. You're driving a car, you got the gas and the brake and the steering wheel and all this. But if you learn from multiple people and not just from one single source, then you're going to be much more informed, and you're going to have a multidimensional perspective on something that is definitely not one-dimensional, for sure. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, from as many people as possible. I love that, because that's kind of what our podcast is all about too, in a way.
Right.
Especially when it comes to, I'm finding this applies to like when you're exploring different healing modalities, possibly, or you're interested in like different divination techniques, maybe. But I have a sound healer. She does biofield tuning here in town that I see, and she's always encouraging me to go and explore other modalities, go see other people.
Right.
I actually had a chance to do that with Chance from Interverse.
Nice.
Yeah, so we did a remote biofield tuning session together, and it works, guys. It works. So definitely check that out if that sounds interesting. But yeah, learning from as many people as possible. We like different perspectives here, so I love that.
It's an awesome example. And if you guys don't mind, I would love to ask, like, what else, since you've started this podcast, like, what else have you been led to look into? Like, I'm sure people have brought up all sorts of ideas that maybe you didn't know about. Were there any other particular learning moments that you guys have had the opportunity to experience now that you've been doing this podcast together?
I can't think of anything specific, just in the overall knowledge, especially in the books, and where you start to see patterns and repetition where you wouldn't think that you had seen it before. That has always been really also kind of fascinating to me. But yeah, most of my revelations have been around neurolinguistics, mostly neurolinguistics, word magic. Yeah, the syntax of a word. It's all of those things. It's the mornings. It's the things that now that I pay attention to happen to me way more often. Where I'll stop and I'll be like, midnight. That's midnight. Like, how did I not ever catch that? And it's stupid little things like that where I just thought it was one full word that meant its own thing. So yeah, and to me that's incredibly powerful because words are incredibly powerful. It is what binds us, and it's what you think a word means and I think a word means that we then form this third idea that we both agree upon. And that is so powerful that, those words are powerful. And if there is something more to this world, because I'm a believer that mantras work. If you follow a mantra, you will find that. And then it just becomes this rolling thing of, it could be incredibly important, the words that you're saying, the mourning. What are we mourning? Is it possible that somewhere along the lines we have been hijacked linguistically and that some of our ills could just be that we speak ill of ourselves? So that's continually, it's a rolling revelation because it keeps my mind in that trench.
Nice. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, the word magic has been most prevalent recently, especially with the Mark England episode, and he's got a bunch of guests that he sent our way too. So it's always something that you can improve on and watch out for. But aside from that, like there's topics that like I've introduced that I've discovered. I mean, I've introduced to the listeners, like our affiliates with Shungite with Derek Condit over at Players, and then Cacao with Jonas, Ketterle, and Red Light Therapy at Mark Sloan. So these are things that I've had experiences with that I've shared with people and have learned more about them along the way. But something that is more like a continuous thing, I guess, would be definitely the language and the word magic. Because in my mind, like every time we do one of these episodes, we're casting spells, which is
right on.
So that's
yeah. And just to quickly comment on the Shungite and the Cacao, it's something really cool that you've been doing in your intro. You get to kind of check in with the audience and be like, here's what we've been up to. And I know you brought up Shungite in Chance's episode. I've heard you speak about the cacao ceremonies in other episodes. And it's awesome that you guys are sharing what you've been learning and what you've been processing as you go into this episode. And it's pretty awesome. So I'm looking forward to continuing to hear what else you guys have to learn, and we'll learn alongside each other. I
mean, that's part of one of the parts I find a lot of enjoyment about doing this is being able to share those things with other people, because it gives, as a listener, right? Because I came from this project, kind of approaching it as a listener before I got involved. And what I took value out of podcasts from that perspective is practical pearls of wisdom that I can take away and actually introduce and implement into my life. So I like to think of these affiliates as opportunities for not only people to improve themselves, but help support something that they love along the way too. So yeah, the affiliate thing is cool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, especially since, it is literally all things that Bill has chased down that are already part of his life. So, it's been kind of just a beautiful synergistic, I'm not hawking you snake oil. I'm, here's what we use and we think it's good. If you're gonna try to go that route, that's the way to do it. So yeah, it's been beautiful to see that kind of just work out, because you see so many people, hawking me undies, and it's like,
nice.
Hey, listen.
Who are your role models and why?
So I have an older brother. He's 4 years older than I am. He's a firefighter. He's a husband. He'll be a father someday, and I'll be the uncle. And we've had quite a contrasting set of personalities. And it's really cool because although I've spent a lot of time in my personal journey comparing myself to my older brother, because we are so different, I've also been very appreciative of any times that we've been able to bridge this cultural gap between us. So I'll give you one example, and I know you guys will relate to this. I have definitely put in some time exploring psychedelic substances. And this was something that it was hard to talk about because it's very challenging to discuss unless you find someone who has gone through the same thing or has had the interest in those same ideas and those same topics. For my brother, he's never done anything like that, yet he's always been willing to discuss it with me and to try to understand what I was going through or what I've learned from these experiences, even though some of them sound crazy from the outside. But he was always willing to come down to my level and try to understand. So I really appreciate him for that. And in addition to that, besides his willingness to, talk about things that he doesn't fully understand and try to learn, he's also very practically oriented. So as a firefighter, he has a lot of mechanical skills that I don't have. I was always a very literary person. I would help him write his essays when he was in high school. And that was really cool for me because I found this talent that I was able to help him put into words things that he was trying to say. And in for that, he would always have in science homework. So like we were like complementing each other in certain ways. If you look at our personalities, contrast how different we are, it's true. But when we come together, when we work together, when we collaborate, we create something really unique together. So I always love talking to him. I'm very proud of him for getting married, for starting his new life with his wife, who's wonderful. He's definitely a role model for me and someone who knew what he knew at 16 years old that he was going to become a firefighter. And he pursued that relentlessly. He never gave up. He never decided to shift gears because he got stuck or he realized it was challenging. He knew the entire time that this was going to be challenging, that people were going to die on his watch, but he was also going to be able to save people. And he was willing to go through those types of experiences and those types of challenges and try to do his absolute best. And I remember as a family, we would watch these firefighting movies like Ladder 49, where fighter who tried to be the hero, he was the one person who, was willing to go towards the burning building when everyone else was running away from it. So I always will respect him for his willingness to be courageous and to be brave and to encourage other people to be brave themselves. So Mike, love you, brother. Hope you're doing good.
Question 11. What quality do you most admire in a woman?
I've heard a lot of women say that they love when they are so well understood by their partner that they don't have to say anything. But I'm kind of an idiot, and I mean that in the best possible way. I don't want to say that to make myself feel weak because it's more of a funny thing. Like I'm not the best with social cues. I'm trying, I'm working on it. But if I take those hints, I don't always feel like I'm doing the right thing. So I love a woman who can speak her truth, who can tell me what she wants and not to cloak it in mystery. And I think part of that mystery is exciting for a lot of ladies, but at the same time, it is a huge help to just have a blunt, almost like to the point conversation to remove any confusion or ambiguity. And, there's definitely a time and place for the mystery or for indirect sort of requests. But for me, I'm kind of a simple guy. So if a woman can tell me what she wants or what she needs or what she's looking for, that is a huge relief. And that's also very inspiring for me personally, because I will build trust very rapidly with someone who isn't afraid to speak up about what they really want or what they really think. So definitely, I love a woman who can speak her mind clearly and honestly at all times.
Yeah, that reminds me of the what does Mark call it? Conflict language? No, I'm sorry. It reminds me of solid talk and soft talk that Mark touches on his vocabulary course. And this it's super helpful because there's a section just for relationships in it, and it just kind of illustrates how there are certain times when soft talk can be helpful, but there are also certain times when it can't. And at that time, it becomes what he calls conflict language as opposed to architect languages, which is speaking directly and communicating efficiently, right?
Interesting. For learning purposes, could you give me an example of soft talk? Like, is that like when someone says I'm fine, but they're not really fine, or is that not the best example?
Using words like indecisive words like maybe, I don't know,
Yes,
sorta, being wishy-washy, and things like that.
I see. I see. Okay, so it's like not exactly clear what they mean or what they're feeling. It's sort of like a deflecting of that inquiry.
Like you're sitting on the fence and you don't want to make a statement one way or the other, right?
That makes sense.
Being the opposite of direct.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever done or seen in your life?
I remember when back in 2015, I was trying to figure out what to do because I was becoming disillusioned with college and with the whole college debt scam that I found myself in. It's almost like if I could go back and avoid all that, I probably would have done something else. But at a certain point, I was like, well, it's too late. I've already put in a couple of years. I got to just finish it up. So it wasn't a waste. But I decided I wanted to do something special for myself in the summertime. So I found this organization, or someone told me about this organization called WOOF. Are you guys familiar with WWOOF?
I am. Adam, have you heard of that?
I don't know. It's not ringing an immediate bell.
Got something to do with organic gardening or farming, right?
Yep. So it's worldwide opportunities on organic farms. And it's a pretty cool resource because you can find a farm anywhere. You can go to Hawaii, you can go to Alaska, you can go to Japan, wherever you want to go. There's a farm out there waiting for some kind of volunteer, like me and my friend who decided we were going to go to a farm in Oregon. And we didn't know much about this place, but all we really knew was that we were going to drive out there from Connecticut. So literally cross-country road trip out to Oregon to volunteer on a farm. And the way that it always works is you trade your time for room and board. So they would house you. And in some cases would actually pay you. So we got paid about $20 a week to help at the farmer's market. So we got a little allowance and that was kind of nice. But the courageous thing for me personally was going out there, not really knowing too much about what I was going to find myself in. So we spoke to the owners of this farm. We had plenty of conversations on the phone, and they explained to us that they had ducks and they had all sorts of other like garlic, strawberries. They had a couple of things going on at their little farm, and they were looking for people who were willing to work about 8 hours a day, and they would give us 3 meals a day. And so we're like, great, that's all we really need. So let's dive into it. So we drove out there, and the work sucked. Like, let me tell you, the work on the farm, I was so excited for it, but at first it let me down. And that was because I had expectations of doing this cool, like planting crops, harvesting crops and all this. But what they really needed was help clearing blackberry bushes. So in Oregon, the blackberry bushes are everywhere. And the particular area that we were in, this family, this couple had a lot of land that could have been used to grow more garlic, more strawberries, more whatever. But these blackberry bushes were just everywhere. So we were clearing them out. And that's what we did for almost a month, was we cleared out blackberry bushes with the like big scissors. I forgot what they're called, loppers. We were chopping away at them little by little every day. And at first I was so upset because I was like, wow, this is not what I expected. But eventually my mindset was changed. And this courageous thing that I think I've done is I was willing to accept that this job I was doing wasn't ideal. It wasn't what I had expected, but I was going to do it anyway. And I was going to face it head on and try to get the best out of it. And like I said earlier, I didn't know what to expect. If I had realized that this is what we were going to be doing, I probably would have chosen a different farm, because there's hundreds and thousands of farms you can go to. This is the one that we happen to land on. And in a similar way, not knowing what to expect, but doing it anyway, and then finding out that it's not what you wanted and making the best out of it, I think does take courage. Because I could have easily just given up and packed up and, call it quits. But I decided to stick it out, and it ended up being a very powerful and transformative experience for me, which I think overall was because I was able to see it out to the end, and I was willing to give it a chance. And the same thing that I'm doing now, in July, I plan to move out to Texas. I'm not going to pack much, just my car. I'm going to drive out there and move in with my friends and then find my own place. And that's another opportunity to dive into the unknown. And I'm not sure what I'm going to find out there, but I know that if I embrace it fully and just be courageous and, not roll over and give up, then there will be plenty of rewards on the other side of that quest.
Yeah, follow the synchronicities. Like, the universe likes to have fun. So the more fun you have, the more it's going to give you. And then the wolf thing, that's super neat that you were able to do that. I know that clearing land is not fun. I've been doing that this past spring and some last year with my property here. We got a bunch of greenbrier, so I was figuring all that out. We have wild raspberry or blackberry bushes here, but it's got greenbrier's got a bunch of thorns, and that's
very thorny. Yeah,
horrible.
It's funny too. My old childhood home was on Greenbrier Lane. It's funny that you bring that up. And Greenbrier is a sacred medicinal plant in the Native American culture up here in the New England area. Pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of synchros, we were watching there's a Greenbrier County in West Virginia. And I only know this because I was watching Appalachian Outlaws recently, where they're picking ginseng. So between, North Carolina and West Virginia. Yeah. There's
right
Greenbrier County.
Follow the synchros, just like you said.
All right. Question 13. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
To be a true man in today's world, I think you really have to believe in yourself. It's nice when people believe in you and people are cheerleading for you and they've got all their love and support flowing out to you, but not everyone has that. And yet they still have to be men. They still have to wake up in the morning and do what's necessary, do what they got to do, take care of the farm, keep everything running, even if no one believes in them. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to know that what you're doing is for the greater good, even if no one else sees what you're doing. It has to be for yourself. And another thing I would say is stick to your values. This older gentleman, he gave me a bit of advice. He told me to never follow a woman. I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, I mean, she's going to lead you where she wants to go, but where do you want to go? I was like, all right, interesting. So I thought about that. I was like, yeah, I got to stick to my own personal values. Whatever I want to do, I got to pursue that. I got to be open to other people's values as well, not to be totally closed off, but to be a true man, have to be true to yourself. And there's one last thing I want to say on this question, which is a really cool question. I'm glad you guys are opening up the conversation about masculinity in this modern world. There's one last thing I want to say on this question, going back to Jordan Peterson, because he's been a huge role model for me in thinking about how to be a stable and grounded, conscious individual. And he would say, and this goes back to how this discussion started, he would say, when you're at your father's funeral, you have to be strong. You have to be the most reliable person at your father's funeral. And I've taken that to heart for sure, because I know that my family, my friends, my inner circle, we're going to go through challenges, and being a true man is going to be putting in that daily work so that I can be strong when people need me. And most of the time, people don't need me. I'm very independent, but there will come a moment where I have to learn to be reliable. So being reliable, being constant, and being truthful are my 3 beliefs in how to be a man in today's world.
Well, sir, that is the core. That is the 13. You are out of the proverbial hot seat there. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, that's was a good answer. I was just fishing for my notes. I have a sticky note on here with the 3 tenets of, what is it? It's whatever practice that the people over in China are being genocided for, right?
The Uyghurs.
Yes. Those people, their main tenets are truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Which forbearance is a fancy word for self-development, right?
Interesting.
I like that in your answer you brought up being truthful, and it was the last thing that you mentioned. And I think that is, in order to do that, we have to know ourselves, and which makes us stronger. And in so doing, and it allows us to be reliable and constant figure, and a strong pillar for people when we're needed the most, such as at our father's funerals, right?
Well said. Yeah. And there's something else to that. Like a lot of people say, if you ever want to be in love with someone else, you have to love yourself. And it's the same way with truth. If you ever want to speak to someone truthfully, then you have to start by being true to yourself as well. So it's a great reminder that those love and truth flow interchangeably for sure at all times.
I think we've got a few moments for some bonus questions.
Nice.
If you're up for that.
That would be awesome. Yeah.
Sweet.
Thank you guys again for the opportunity. This has been really fun.
Wow, it's not over yet. You still got a few more.
Awesome. Let's dive in.
Kind of wanted to ask this one because I won't preface it with anything, but what are you most curious about?
I've been most curious about dreams lately. I've been taking a bit of a break from my THC habit, if you know what I mean. And I know that for a long time, I wasn't remembering any dreams at all. And I'm slowly working back to that type of study, because it is a very interesting inner work that we can all do every day when we wake up. Write down what you're dreaming. And I remember this spark of curiosity came from a repetitive nightmare that I would have when I was younger. If anyone is into the reptilians, it's going to make you laugh. But my repetitive nightmare was being chased around by a dinosaur on the school playground, and it would always eat me in the end. So I had a deep fear of lizards back when I was younger, particularly like a velociraptor type of dinosaur. And so when I finally gained access to Google as like a 12-year-old, I was like, how do you get rid of a repetitive nightmare? And I've told the story about my first experience becoming lucid or experiencing that sleep paralysis phenomena, which is very different for many people. But for me personally, I felt like I was being shocked by something, like electricity was flowing through me. And I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I was just taking it. And so that has made me very curious. And since I've been enjoying the cannabinoids, I haven't really been able to tap into that. But it's definitely something I'm looking forward to exploring some more. What about you guys? Are you into lucid dreaming?
Yeah, I've got the same. I don't dream too much, just exactly for what you just mentioned. But
yeah.
It is interesting just learning more about what the reality and nature of dreams in general, and that they're these subconscious archetypes that we interact with when we go to sleep that are existing in this kind of alternative space that is an unmanifested section of reality. Like it's super interesting.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly the same. I don't remember my dreams. But when I do, I've never had the opportunity to jump into the driver's seat. So I am incredibly jealous of those who do.
If I can give you guys a quick practical tip, you probably heard of what a reality check is, right? Like if you want to know if you're dreaming or not, the best way to check your reality is to plug your nostrils and try to breathe. So like obviously you can't breathe, right? But when you're dreaming, you can always breathe no matter what. Even if you're underwater, even if you're in outer space, you can always breathe. So if you think something seems off, just be like, am I dreaming? And then try to breathe. And that's my number one tip for anyone, besides like the dream journal and paying attention to the patterns in your dreams and things like that, is just check your reality every now and then. And I actually used to have this app. Every 90 minutes, it would ping me and say like, hey, are you dreaming? And it's kind of absurd to think about, like, all right, like obviously we're awake, but it's not always obvious when you're.
I've heard kind of the opposite. So instead of trying to remind yourself so that you'll find yourself waking up within the dream, but doing something so that every time you do something, like whenever you turn on a light switch or walk through a door, you stop, ask yourself, am I dreaming? And try to do something like that. So then if you always do it, then you will always do it in your dream. So you'll at least always have the opportunity to realize.
Exactly. It's that same idea, that doorway method or that light switch methods. Like these are things that we do every day. I used to have a lot of dreams of me driving in my car. So like I would always do a quick reality check when I get in and out of the vehicle. And yeah, those repetitive habits will carry over into your quote unquote dream body or your astral body. It's really cool.
I did have a couple lucid dream experiences when I was younger, and one of them involved, the classic being chased by a monster down a long hallway. And as I had realized when I was in a dream, the hallway got longer, and of course my feet got heavier, and the monster and all that stuff, and I woke up. But yeah, lucid dreaming is super. Yeah, I'm also curious about that, and we have an episode with Lee about lucid dreaming. He wrote a book about it on. Actually like a handbook guide type thing. It's actually really neat.
Nice. Lee, is that their full, like if I search the episode, it'd be Lee?
This is Adam, do you remember the full guest name?
Yeah, I can pull up the Libsyn account real quick.
Cool. Thank you, Lee. It's a really cool resource to put out there because it's a topic that a lot of people just kind of go to bed, and that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, just kind of going to bed and resting and not really thinking about the dream world. But then to kind of remember that there's this whole other dimension that we're potentially missing out on. Like I always tell people that you spend a third of your whole life asleep. That could be decades if you really add it up.
Yeah, it was Lee Adams on 13
Lee Adams. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, I think we've got another bonus question for you. I won't preface this with anything, but because I like where you took the last one. So what daily habits or rituals do you have?
Ooh. Okay. Well, it's transformed recently. I started the Loco Listens podcast in about mid-March, beginning of April. And before that point, my daily habit, which I love so much, it's my favorite ritual, is to have my coffee and then to open up a book. And I live in this tiny little, this cottage, basically like a tiny house. And what I do is I have my book and I pace fucking lunatic, and I just read and drink my coffee, and I squat sometimes. Yeah, I can never sit down. I have to pace back and forth. And that would get me fired up. That would get my neurons fired up for the rest of the day. And, whatever I would read about, being able to move around as I absorb it always helped. But now these days, what I've been doing, I went a little crazy. I scheduled a podcast literally every day of this month, including Mother's Day. So I didn't take a single day off. And so I always have something to edit or go into in the morning before I go to work. So same thing, just different activity, make that coffee, fire up the laptop, and kind of dive back into the Audacity or the video editing software. And that's been cool because, the podcast is bringing out the best in me. And I think I'm always nervous to be a guest on a podcast more so than I am to host, because I feel like I can get people talking pretty well. But this has been definitely a game changer. And although I'm not reading as much as I used to, I'm happy that I've been having these cool conversations with people like you guys. So it's really a true blessing. And this morning ritual of just working on the podcast, it sounds kind of boring, but it's very exciting at the same time to be able to learn from these unique people and to have all these different perspectives flowing in and out of my consciousness.
So instead of just reading in the morning, you just edit then? Yeah.
Yeah. My goal for June though, because I'm gonna slow it down, I'm gonna get ready to move to Texas, is to get back into it, because I do, there's a lot of books stacking up that I want to get into, so I got to make time for them. And I only really like reading in the morning, because by the end of the day I'm pretty burned out, so I don't typically read in the afternoon.
Yeah, I'm finding that it's morning time is more amiable to reading myself. We do have a question 3 book list on the website that features the answers.
I was going to ask, yeah.
So definitely check that out if anybody is looking for a good book recommendation.
And for you guys currently, are you working on a particular book, whether individually or are you guys reading something together right now?
Me personally, I'm going through The Unveiled Mysteries by Godfrey Ray King. It's coming out of the Saint Germain Press.
Ooh,
It's got purple ink, so that's kind of neat.
wow. Huh.
That's
well,
actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, currently I do not have a book that I am in the middle of.
Are you guys familiar with Micah Dank?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just got to speak to him recently. I read his first book, Beneath the Veil, which is book one of the Into the Rabbit Hole series. And it's pretty cool that fiction is a way to reveal all these truths and insights below the surface of the plot line. So it's kind of cool. I've been really into fiction and nonfiction, and I'm curious, Bill, can you give a little background on that book? It sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm not too far into it, maybe like the third chapter, but this is the story of a man named Mr. Ballard who later on, I believe, changed his name or was known as Godfrey Ray King, and he had interactions with Saint Germain on Mount Shasta in the 30s. And there's a whole like institution that sprung up around it. Dr. Berlando actually talks a lot about it in his episode of 13 Questions. That's why I'm reading this book, actually. And it's actually like 33 books or something like that. And the one that he mentioned specifically are the I Am discourses, which I'm going through that too at a separate, slower pace, I guess. And yeah, it's super interesting. I will tell you that.
Yeah, is Saint Germain that immortal character who keeps on popping up throughout various periods of history? Am I thinking of the right person?
Yeah. He was in the royal courts and houses of France before the French Revolution happened. He was trying to kind of smooth out things between the elite, the quote unquote elites, right? And try to get them to see the light of day, so to speak. It didn't quite work out the way he had intended to. But yeah, he had a hand in helping found America. And yeah, it's just a super, super interesting story. Dr. Bear knows a whole lot more about it than I am. I'm still learning. So yeah, go check out that episode if you want to get into that. That's the only other place I think that we've talked about it on the show so far.
Nice.
And I think with that, did you want to let people know where to find you and do your plugs?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you guys. This has been really fun, and I appreciate the invitation for sure. You guys have a great format here, and shout out to the Grimerica squad, Graham and Darren. I'm glad you guys all were able to work this out, and this is a really great service for the podcasting world. But you guys can find me, the Loco Listens Podcast. And if you want to join the Telegram chat and share your funny memes or your insights or your songs or your books, whatever you want, go to t.me/Loco Listeners. And we have a great group there. It's very lively. Like I said, full of memes and all sorts of resources. So please share it there and join the conversation. And I appreciate you guys, Bill and Adam. You guys are wonderful hosts, and I'm looking forward to going back to check out some of those other insights that you've dropped throughout this conversation. So thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, because it goes both ways. The most valuable thing, part of your life, time, you've given that. And for that, thank you so much.
It's a true honor. And I appreciate, like I said, you guys bring out the best in people, just like I talked about with Chance. So these are awesome questions, and I'm so happy that you've been able to explore these ideas with so many cool people. So I'm glad to be a part of it in some way, and I appreciate the invitation once again.
Yeah, man, we're going to keep it going, right? So we're going to keep releasing episodes and more content to come from both of us, and I'll be hopping in the Telegram group. That link will be in the show notes for the listeners too, so I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, dude, thanks again.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great weekend. Happy Saturday. Happy birthday, Dad.
you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo
Why
what?
is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why? I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo
Why is
what?
there innocent people locked up for life? While some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii?
Why?
How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo what? How you wanna Hawaii? How you wanna Hawaii, yo what?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.